introduction,
Yeah.
say hello, etc. Blah blah blah. Do a bit of thank you, Tom, for allowing us to create a Bokashi heap on your plot.
Yeah, pleasure.
Can you introduce yourself and where you are, where in the world you are?
Right, here we are in Glastonbury, West Pennard, nearby. There's a tour over there in Avalon. And this is Old Farm. It's a very old 700, close to 700 years, 1345 I think it is.
Wow.
It's very, very old. That thatched cottage there and everything. So these buildings are like grade 2 star. It's a very special listing.
Wow, okay.
So there's a lot of restrictions on what we can and can't build
Yeah,
here.
it's all the owl area as well. It's nice to see that you're keeping the nature involved as well.
That's nice. And it was a good owner before, and he had good intentions and did a lot of restoration on the houses. And Mel's taken it on 2 years ago and did even more work on the houses. And we've got veg patches over there, no dig style with 2 polytunnels. And we've got a 4-acre orchard of juices and ciders with sort of heirloom varieties. And currently we've got sheep in there grazing in the winter, and they'll be moved into these other 2 paddocks. So we've got 2 more acres of paddock, which they graze in the summer. And that's currently how this place is set up.
Yep.
But there's loads of scope for kind of shifting things about and adjusting. And I want to get more into the composting side of things.
Yep.
And instead of burning and removing waste, it seems as though, for a long time, there hasn't been enough composting here.
Okay.
And
So I presume most of it's been brought in if you ever.
Yeah, well, at least for the no-dig beds, that was all brought in.
Yeah.
And, obviously the plan to bring in that compost in a week or so.
Yeah.
That's to kind of renew the beds which haven't been touched for over a year.
Yeah.
No-dig style. You don't want to be fighting the weeds and that kind of thing.
So what's your objective? What do you want to achieve in the next couple of years?
Right. Okay. So stage 1 for me was really dealing with this mess in the barn, which we had 4 years of just bad hay, going bad and mouldy. And, at the end of the last owner's place here, you just sort of things kind of fell apart a little bit, wasn't managing too much on the farm and kind of on his way out.
Yeah.
And the first couple of years here, the place wasn't really managed responsibly, in the sense that when I arrived, there was big stack of mouldy hay, and it was all being fed to the donkey and pony, and they were getting sick and they were having coughs and all sorts of problems. So changed up their hay, they started getting better, and then I started burning all of this old hay.
Yep. Which, to be honest, is it's a drastic measure, but actually it's
like,
the easiest way to
when
deal
you've got
with
that much quantity.
Yeah.
It was like probably in the range of 250 cubic meters of bad hay, and like, wow, trying to process all of that with like our tiny little Kubota tractor.
So we've been in contact a couple of months before, and
yes.
I hadn't heard from you for a couple of months. I was like, oh, I wonder if you're actually going to do something with it. But I can see now why it took so long for you to get back to me, and what I like about what you've now got, what we were going to process today, is like the best of what you had.
It's the best of the shit stuff. Basically, where we had loads of mouldy hay surrounding last season's hay, so it all kind of got mixed up.
Yeah.
So now we've got the best of it. It's about 60, 70 bales. So it's all very manageable, with 2 or 3 people doing the work.
If you're processing it for organic matter, which is what the key objective is, and you're keeping that carbon into that process, you're doing the right thing to process a waste product, which you would normally just burn, and actually make a use of it, because I mean, I'm looking at your ground politely. It's excellent. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's
nice and old. Yeah. It's very loamy. There's a lot of it's very lush, alluvial.
Yeah.
We're close to the levels here, but it does get exceedingly wet.
Yeah, and I think
so
you just need a bit more structure in respect of the soil.
Totally.
So, and we were just discussing. Obviously, we're going to create the Bokashi windrow here. But you've also got this side as well, which is quite interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were just discussing about your watercourse here. So what is this?
This is an old ditch, and currently it's backed up because we've got a willow tree with roots kind of growing into the ditch, and the tree has also fallen over, so that the roots are kind of stabilizing the tree into the ditch. But there's another motivation for the roots to go in there, is the overflow runoff from the septic tank, which is just up the top of this field here. So the septic tank wasn't working properly.
Not as efficient as it should be.
We didn't have it bubbling for a while. When I arrived, it wasn't bubbling, and I'm like, well, hold on a second, let's get this fixed. So now it's bubbling.
Yeah.
But this ditch was backed up, and it was smelling a bit. Thankfully, now the smell is gone. But regardless, I think it runoff from the pile, because we're going to build them right here, I think will really benefit this ditch as well, just to kind of...
So you won't get too much runoff. Looking at the hay, obviously the hay is going to have a quite a difficult time to get moist because it's been obviously dry for so long.
Yes.
But we're going to use some donkey poo as well, just as a layer system. But yeah, anything it does as a surface runoff into the ditch will help with that microbiome in that side as well. So yeah, it'll definitely help with that process.
And you were saying chuck a litre of EM1 in there.
Yeah, so septic tanks, when they're managed well, the problem is that most septic tanks people forget about them. That's what happens. You're doing your business, and at some point you have the smell, and the smell is normally a build-up of a crust, and that's where the issues is. So the bubbling system stops that crusting happening, and if that bubbling system doesn't work, it creates a crust, which means that the water the liquid can't go anywhere. So you have a big crust, and that crust gets bigger and bigger and bigger to a point where it becomes unmanageable. You create that microbiome in that septic tank with bacteria that can break it down more efficiently. Firstly, no smell. You will have zero smell in that. But also, when it is then pushed out through the system, most of the toxins would have been eaten by that microbiome. So actually, it becomes a beneficial more than a hindrance. Now, obviously, you've got swells, which is why the drain is in kind of stages. So the ground will do most of the work for you to then get to a point where it becomes less toxic. But also, if you start at the top with a good microbiome and work your way through, actually that then becomes a better filtration system. And won't cause as much issues in long term. To be honest, with the house you've got here and the septic tank you have, even I'm looking at your watercourse here, it's well long enough for it to be able to process all the way through.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll start processing and see how we get on.
Yeah, nice one.
Work for January. Hold on, let's get a ref back. So I'll just explain what we're actually doing here. So normally we're looking for a carbon to nitrogen ratio. Bokashi really needs to be a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The key thing with Bokashi though is that you don't need to worry too much about carbon to nitrogen ratio. The only thing that changes really is time. So normally with composting, you've got carbon and nitrogen, greens and browns. You have water, microbes to be able to do the decomposition, air and pH. Those are your key elements when it comes to composting. Bokashi works in a very similar system, but like anything, we just need to utilise what we already have. So what we're doing here is we're just taking the bales, forking them out as much as we can. We're going to use the Actifirm and water to then create some moisture content for microbes to move around. And then, although it looks like I'm shoveling just mud onto the side, this is rotted donkey poo. To be honest, it's really good as it is, but it'll give us a bit of a nitrogen content to help with that carbon to nitrogen ratio. In a perfect world, and Tom, when he moves forward with this, he'll be using the hay, and then he'll be using greens and browns as much as he can, and he'll start to store those that content so he can then process it to give you a better carbon to nitrogen ratio. But normally I would say that this would be, to get to a point where it's malleable and usable for the soil, normally be 8 to 12 weeks. Realistically, we're looking probably 16 to 18 weeks for this to be processed. And obviously in a couple of months' time, we'll come back and we'll have a look at it and see how it's getting on.
Oh, lovely. Is that your addition? Is that your high nitrogen input?
A little dudes here. So this has already happened in the donkey muck. So these will help with the decomposition anyway, and help with the Bokashi process. So they're here because there's nutrients, so the nutrients can then be used in the Bokashi process, so it's not harming them, it's actually going to help them and breed. Never thought I'd get excited about composting. Yes.
Yeah, it's a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, I'll be. This is gonna be sweet. This is gonna be a lovely pile. Lush.